Artist. The whole kit is worth about $2,000. We're going to see how an animator can create a character. The animator behind The Secret of Nim is Don Bluth. Don worked for the Walt Disney Studio for almost 10 years. Then he and two partners set up shop in Don's garage. They were joined by 14 other Disney artists, all wanting to bring back classical animation techniques.
Very few can say they built a studio from Disney animators that would eventually battle Disney for box office dominance itself. Here's the story of one attempt.
Aurora and Don Bluth Productions present...
I ain't scared of nothing.
Do you really think I'm royalty?
You know I do.
Then stop bossing me around.
I belong with you.
Rolling into the 90s, Disney reinstated itself a titan in the family feature film department while simultaneously revolutionizing their animation department. The Little Mermaid debuted Disney's first use of computer-generated art and effects, combined with the hand-drawn animation form. The film crushed box office records and was recognized at the Academy Awards. Most importantly, became a staple in households everywhere. The avalanche that followed would become the Disney Renaissance. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Disney was proving with hit after hit that they were leading a revolutionary new era. But Disney, of course, wasn't the only feature film studio. Everyone was watching as the Magic Kingdom was becoming an icon of pop culture again, and many followed the formula. 20th Century Fox wasn't new to the concept of leading a pop culture craze. The studio long held some of the most successful films in history. Musical drama The Sound of Music was the financial and cultural behemoth. Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi horror Alien became a trendsetter. The Planet of the Apes was loved for its imagination and prosthetic effects. Die Hard shook up the concept of an action thriller. And George Lucas's radical space opera Star Wars, well, it needed no introduction. The studio had no hesitation to jump into the ring and bring their identity to the family feature film world. They just needed expertise to launch. Fox president Bill Mechanic understood jumping into animation was very risky. While the Mouse House was finding unprecedented success in the moment, they had been floundering in decades prior. Fox needed a track record of success, so they chose the studio that had been combating the Mouse House since their inception. The Bluth Studio's lineage far outweighed American Tail, their 1986 hit that, at the time, was the most successful animated film beyond the gates of the Magic Kingdom. Launched in the late 70s, the original Bluth group was a ragtag team of Disney animators, led by Don Bluth, who believed Disney had lost care in animation, cutting costs and ignoring the true value of the art form. Don's disagreement of vision stemmed from his love of the brand from childhood. He'd watch Disney films when they landed on the local theater screen and copy any Disney comic he could find. In 1957, Bluth landed his first job with the Mouse House at age 18, as an assistant to legendary animator John Lunsberry, who had worked on nearly all Disney full-length animated features since the mid-1930s. Bluth would go between working at Disney and other jobs until 1971, at which point Disney would take a more centralized role. Through the decade, Bluth worked on Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, and The Rescuers. He was director of animation on Pete's Dragon, but come the late 70s is where his disagreement with the direction of Disney hit a boiling point. Bluth had developed a short film, Manjo and the Woodpile Cat, while still working at Disney, but soon after would lead a mass exodus from the studio. On his 42nd birthday, Bluth, along with over a dozen animators, resigned from Disney with the plan to create animated features with the soul once found in Disney pictures. The team went on to produce what would become the indie group's most successful feature, the 1982 dark fantasy feature, Secret of Nim.
It's a fantasy with wizards and villains.
scared of nothing.
Go off somewhere else and start their own new society.
Come on! It's an odyssey to another world.
But I think they'll like the exciting animation. The Secret of NIMH was made by a group of animators led by a man named Don Bluth. They used to work for the Disney studios, but they walked out because they thought the original Disney traditions were no longer being followed. And my notion is, Walt Disney would have liked The Secret of NIMH.
NIMH found incredible acclaim from audiences and critics, presenting a feature of detail, depth, and specialty that would become timeless, while simultaneously showing that the years of work and effort from the team wasn't just smoke and mirrors. However, the studio would face another issue. NIMH not only had trouble at the box office, distributor MGM UA cut the expected wide release from 1,000 theaters to 100. This would lead to Bluth Studios needing to gain a revenue source and found a new role from arcade game company Cinematronics.
Space Ace, defender of justice, truth, and the planet Earth. Ace is being attacked by the evil Commander Borg.
Hold your fire! Who is that creep? Borg!
Earthlings must surrender to me.
No way, Borg, old buddy.
Oh! Ah! I've been hit! By the Infanto Ray.
Earthlings must surrender to me.
Struggle with Dexter to regain his manhood. Destroy the Infanto Ray. Defeat the evil Borg.
Hey, Borg! Come on, Kimberly, let's go. I've been hit. Ah!
Be valiant, Space Warrior. The fate of Earth is in your hands.
With arcade visual technology advancing, games at the time were becoming more than just Pong. Stories, characters, and adventures could be fleshed out, making for greater and more immersive experiences. Bluth Group was tasked on animation for titles Dragon Lair, Dragon Lair 2, and Space Ace. Space Ace and Dragon Lair were hits, but Cinematronics had its own financial issues, and midway through production of Dragon Lair 2, filed for bankruptcy protection, leaving Bluth Group out in the cold, where it would file as well, entering the mid-80s. While working at Cinematronics, Don Bluth had met merger broker and animation enthusiast Morris Sullivan, who, after discovering Bluth Group was in bankruptcy, infused the company with money and his own expertise, with the new moniker, Sullivan Bluth Studios. Bluth would have a number of encounters that would spawn success. A meeting with Steven Spielberg would become a full-blown production of An American Tail, with the backing of Amblin Entertainment and the monstrous Universal Pictures distributing the feature. The film had wide marketing and attention alongside its release in 1986, debuting 4 months after The Great Mouse Detective and outgrossing it by over $20 million. Think about that. This studio, that started as a team to combat Disney's corporatist style, faced death after developing one of the best animated features of the decade and grew to work with Steven Spielberg, had now produced the most successful animated feature outside of the Mouse House itself.
In the front, higher, higher! Laughter. Joy. Tears. And love to your whole family. Steven Spielberg presents An American Tail.
Ironically, the studio that had just produced An American Tail would move to Ireland for financial support, including significantly more government tax breaks and backing. Sullivan Bluth Studios would again have the support and input of Spielberg and Amblin Entertainment, with additional input from George Lucas as well. Following American Tail was 1988's The Land Before Time, a film that featured violence, adorability, adventure, and suspense along the backdrop of the age of dinosaurs. The feature went toe-to-toe with Disney's Oliver & Company, releasing the same opening weekend. The Bluth feature would conquer Oliver & Company, but it wouldn't come close to the Mouse House's summer success that year, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which would top over $300 million. A towering sign of things to come. By 1989, the studio was finalizing work on a project long since planned in the early era of the Bluth Group, a dog-based story, and production work was prioritized in the States, where the company simultaneously worked on commissioned adverts for US and European companies. Sullivan distanced financing from Hollywood producers like Spielberg to allow for more inbred story development, and using the same strategy that won them box office success the prior year, on November 17, 1989, All Dogs Go to Heaven went up against another Disney feature.
In An American Tale, he gave us a memorable mouse. Then, in The Land Before Time, he brought us some delightful dinosaurs. Now, director Don Bluth unleashes his most extraordinary adventure ever. All Dogs Go to Heaven.
In addition to being confused, I found All Dogs Go to Heaven to be needlessly violent, that the dogs really lacked any kind of fresh personalities, and the drawing of the film wasn't anything special either. So thumbs down for me.
Well, this movie suffers from the fact that it comes out at the same time as The Little Mermaid, which is really an animated classic. And this is not an animated classic, but I did enjoy it, and I think you were a little bit too hard on it. I think that the plot was not that hard to follow, really. I mean, after all, this is for 6-year-olds, and I think they could probably follow it.
I don't know that they can.
And I did enjoy the drawing. I think Don Bluth has tried to liberate himself from the Disney cookie cutter factory that he left. Bluth is an animator who left Disney in 1979 to set out on his own. And with these dogs and with the other characters in the movie, including it's an alligator, not a sea monster, and I could see that it was an alligator anyway, I think he gives them a lot of personality by allowing them to stretch. They become kind of rubbery and kind of flexible, and I enjoyed that kind of animation.
I don't know that this story was worth doing. Do you think the story was worth telling?
Frequently with animated films, I have a feeling that the story is the last thing they're concerned about. I think they're concerned more with visual sequences and how things can be developed on that basis.
But what makes
the overall...
The Little Mermaid would become one of the most timeless animated features in history, while All Dogs Go to Heaven would have to resort to VHS release sales to find success. Sullivan's financing choice led the company to be placed in the Goldcrest Films umbrella, a move that, at first, allowed for creative freedom while producing All Dogs Go to Heaven. But after the film proved to be a theatrical flop, Goldcrest quickly attempted to liquidate the studio's assets, and after a grueling lawsuit, Goldcrest still was allowed to keep portions of the studio's artwork. By 1992, after redubbing as purely Don Bluth Entertainment, the studio released Rock-a-Doodle, with Goldcrest still distributing in Europe and the Samuel Goldwyn Company working out a deal to distribute the film in the States. The film bombed itself out of existence and nearly did the same to the studio, which had to cut 30 employees and declared bankruptcy by October of 1992. With a number of projects halted but still potential successes if ever released, the studio was given a $14 million investment by Merlin Films out of the UK and Media Assets out of Hong Kong. An additional $6 million was given to solidify completion of the first 2 films. Warner Brothers would handle distribution. The key projects in development included Thumbelina, A Troll in Central Park, and Pebble the Penguin. Thumbelina was fast-tracked by Merlin and Media Assets as the most potentially successful of the 3. Released in mid-1994, the film was not only slammed by critics but bombed financially. A Troll in Central Park had originally been slated to release first, with much more production time already sunken into the film. As Bluth would explain later, the feature was significantly undercooked at release, particularly within its story. Warner would additionally put no marketing into Troll, and in finality, it would make just $75,000 in its fall 1994 debut. Pebble and the Penguin released in the shape a final film from a company barely surviving would. MGM UA took over distribution of the feature and decided to significantly cut a variety of scenes and characters, which required reworking on the voiceovers. The restitching and reworking of the film led the animation work being unfinished and outsourced to Hungarian animation studio Reflex Animation. Upon its 1995 release, Bluth wanted no association with the feature, but by then he had found a chance to save his studio, and more importantly, his ability to work in animation. Years prior, in 1993, Bluth and partner Goldman met with top execs at 20th Century Fox. The Bluth Group would partner with Fox for the benefit of reaching greater storytellers that would orbit greater audience retention and critical success. Fox would partner with Bluth to have a prominent industry insider for a sharper edge against Disney. Bluth would now be a prominent figure at the freshly debuted Fox Animation Studios. Bluth once again stood with the potential to duel against the Mouse House in the heart of one of the studio's most successful ages. Fox president Bill Mechanic gave the fresh new team their first mission, an adaptation of the 1956 feature Anastasia. Pulling no punches, Bluth and Goldman worked with ex-CIA agents that had been stationed in Moscow and St. Petersburg to get an idea of the feeling and tone of Russia. The script penned by Eric Tuchman was very adult, very based in reality, all about politics and without any magic or comedy. And the project would be reshaped as the deeper the team researched, the darker and more grim the story would turn. This led to significant shifts and rewrites to the script, with numerous hands. Bruce Graham and Susan Gauthier are credited on retoning the script to a romantic comedy. Bob Zudiker, Noni White, and even Carrie Fisher reworked the script later in development as well. Musical composers for the film were particularly disappointed in the choice of historical inaccuracy and the portrayal of Grigory Rasputin, who had been dead and generally unrelated to the original story, and his sidekick Bat, who was only added for comedic value. The film would have a significant battle to capture an audience. Disney wasn't about to let a new rival reach them. The Magic Kingdom gated any ability for Fox to advertise during its popular re-airing of Wonderful World of Disney, and re-released The Little Mermaid a week before Anastasia's release date.
Excuse me, it's very difficult to enjoy a movie when you're talking and shushing at me.
All the characters from the new movie Anastasia are now at Burger King. One cool toy just $2.59 with any value meal purchase.
Enter the Fox Kids Amazing Anastasia Adventure Sweepstakes. Win!
Ooh. Take me to Anastasia.
20th Century Fox presents a magical musical adventure. Wow! Anastasia.
Fox countered with an incredible marketing push, over $50 million of investment, at a final cost 35% higher than what was used on Independence Day. Going against Disney made Fox pull out all the stops for an unproven studio. But by the end of the film's run, the move turned out to be a mistake. The $50 million marketing investment bubbled the film's budget to nearly $100 million, while it only made $140 million. Just as Bluth relied on for prior works, home media sales needed to foot the rest of the bill. Its subpar theatrical performance gave off less confidence in the animation studio, and their follow-up feature, Bartok, stayed within the lore Anastasia had built and was given no theatrical release. They also weren't the only studio vying for audience eyes. Warner Brothers had a slate of releases after the success of Space Jam. Nickelodeon partnered with film division Paramount and was finding just as much success theatrically as on cable. Disney now had a 1-2 punch with computer animation studio Pixar, and the freshly debuted DreamWorks Animation was already proving a greater opponent to the Mouse House. The $100 million animation studio investment wasn't only becoming unnoticed in the grand scheme of audiences, but a deeper hole Fox couldn't dig themselves out of. The investment's purpose was to have a feature film ready every 18 months, a timeline far out of reach. Their next film would have to be a Hail Mary. A live-action project had been in development since 1998, but to no avail was already $30 million in the hole and little to show. The team working on it was canned, and 20th Century Fox chairman Bill Mechanic tossed the assignment to the fledgling Fox Animation Studio with force. This is the project you'll take. You'll have 18 months to complete it, and if you do not, this studio is shut down. Titan AE would get a budget of $75 million and a locked 18-month time frame. The majority of the film's production was on CG animation. Even with the studio firing on all cylinders, the writing was on the wall. Fox Film president Bill Mechanic, who had greatly invested in the animation studio from the beginning, was ousted. 60% of the studio's employees were laid off, and most of the rest of Titan AE's development would be outsourced.
Journey to the cutting edge of technology. Titan AE.
Enemy warships have entered Earth's solar system.
The critics have discovered Titan AE is out of this world. It's Star Wars meets The Matrix.
Akima, I can't shake him!
Spectacularly imaginative. Spin Magazine says Titan AE is unlike anything you've ever seen. It's heavy metal and Star Wars rolled into one. Blast off on the state-of-the-art thrill ride. It's Titan AE.
Just after the film hit theaters in June of 2000, Fox Animation Studios was dead. Even if the film had been a success, 20th Century was now hesitantly moving on with a video effects company that had pitched its ability to produce animated comedies using the same computer-generated animation. Very few can say they stood for what valued to them most, instead of simply settling down and accepting the status quo. Even fewer can present a legacy of work that has drawn such fandom and love to a worldwide stage that will truly hold relevance decades into the future and beyond. I recommend The Secret of NIMH, An American Tale, The Land Before Time, Anastasia, Titan AE, or any of Bluth's works for that matter, in a world where conglomerates seem to own all. It's rebels like Bluth that prove our value. Anyway, hats off to you, Don Bluth.